Welcome to the Human Conversation podcast with Jules White, the real dragon slayer, author and entrepreneur sales coach. Tune in weekly for human conversation about business and sales. Enjoy business expert interviews, educational episodes, and virtual cuppers with entrepreneur business owners. So grab yourself a cuppa and enjoy. Here is your host, Jules White.
So welcome everybody to the Human Conversation. My guest today is a wonderful chap called Chris Goldson. I don't know him very well, and actually I find that exciting because some of my guests I've known for a while, so I sort of know some bits and bobs to kind of introduce into the podcast. This is a really raw, real human conversation, Chris. Good morning to you.
Well, good morning to you, Jules. It's really great. I'm really thrilled. Well, given we've only got to know each other a little bit in recent months, I hope this goes okay because I don't want this to be the last time we talk.
Oh my goodness, it will definitely not be the last time we talk. Listen, for the listeners, Chris, you are the new founder, we're going to call you,
Okay.
of Goldilocks Limited. Now, that is even more exciting when we tell everybody about that, because what an amazing name. Based on your surname, I'm going to sort of be talking about how this name came about because it's wonderful. But essentially, your business is all around storytelling and presentation skills, isn't it, Chris? But we are going to obviously we're going to talk about that more. You've had 34 years in corporate, and now you're 6 months into your entrepreneurial journey. We're really going to unpick that for sure. Yeah. But I have a question I always ask, which starts off my podcast, and that is, what was it you wanted to do when you left school?
I don't know. I don't think I had an idea of what I wanted to do at all, really. I mean, I left school and I went to do a degree in Winchester, and I didn't know where I wanted to end up, but I suppose I wanted to continue doing what I really enjoyed doing, which was I really enjoyed studying English. I particularly loved theatre studies when I was at school. So, getting the chance to be on stage and drama, etc. So my degree was in English and drama. So it was really just a continuation of that. And to some extent, even when I'd finished the degree, I didn't really know what I wanted to do after that. And like loads of people, I ended up working in media sales, like lots of people did. And to be honest, most people I've met who were in media sales said, I don't know how I ended up in media sales. Most people just go, I just found myself here. I think the reason I got into media sales was when I was studying, I actually ran the student newspaper for a year with a friend of mine. And I absolutely loved that. And I suppose that got me slightly interested in some of the magazines that I was reading at the time, and there was a version of Time Out for the Winchester Southampton region called Due South, and they were looking for an ad salesperson, and I thought, well, this will keep me in the area, because actually I was going out with someone who is my wife. So I thought, well, she was a year below me, so I thought this might keep me in the area for another year while I wait for her to graduate. But so I chatted to them about this job, and suddenly this world of advertising opened up. They said, we can't really pay you, but you do get lots of free meals out in restaurants. And I thought, okay, that sounds great, but I'm not sure that's going to work. And they said, but if you go to London, you can get really well paid and do this. And I thought, well, I'll go and do that then. So went to London. I just couldn't believe that you could do a job where you could just talk all day and try and convince people to do stuff. And I know you're sales is such a massive part of what you do. And there's something, I think, where I felt like I was learning a craft and the art of sales. And that stayed with me, for over 30 years. I've always seen myself as a salesperson, even though I've done roles where I've been a marketeer. I describe myself more, in some ways, more than anything, as I've been a salesperson all my life.
It's really interesting because you mentioned just a minute ago about most people who are in media sales actually don't know how they got there. Well, I worked at Yellow Pages. It's not quite
Yeah.
media sales, but it's certainly advertising sales. And I, before that, was actually selling stainless steel. So I totally don't know how I got to
Yeah.
Yellow Pages. That was so random. I think it was just a recruitment agency. I want to change my job. What have you got? And they
Yes.
just put me forward for Yellow Pages. And once Yellow Pages was on my CV, I
Yeah.
could actually go anywhere and sell. It was
Yeah.
a real credibility, as is some of the brands I saw on your CV. So just tell us
Yes.
a little bit more about the businesses you've worked with, Chris.
Yeah, I feel really fortunate at the places that I've worked. And in fact I started in a really interesting place because the first job that I got was part of Robert Maxwell's kind of business empire, and Maxwell Business Communicators, MBC. I started on something called Journalist Week, which was a magazine that just went to journalists and editors. But the sister title to that was Media Week. And then I moved across to that and I worked on that for a couple of years. So I was working on a magazine that was all about the industry itself, which is it's kind of very meta about it, self-referential. But it meant that I learned a lot about media, and I was selling to managing directors of radio stations and outdoor companies and business publishers, and I was just immediately in that world. I started going to the Media Week Awards in the early 90s, and so I got a really good understanding, I think, of what it meant to be in media, because that was the subject. And then I spent time, worked for part of the Financial Times, their business side. My first move into consumer, which I found really exciting, that was working for BBC Good Food magazine, and eventually I was the ad manager on that. I loved the fact that I could walk into a newsagent and pick a copy off the shelf, and my name was I think it was called the flannel panel at the time, and something that my parents were reading, and so and there was a link there as well with the BBC, and suddenly I was in the world. It was at the time when the celebrity chefs were really starting, Gary Rhodes and Jamie Oliver, and MasterChef with Lloyd Grossman was really starting to pick up,
Yes.
and I absolutely loved that world, being part of something that I felt very proud of, the BBC, and yet the commercial side of it. It was great. So 7 years there. I worked with Tesco in the early days of the web, when they were launching their online grocery service, which obviously, is massive, massive success now, but it was very early days for that,
Mm.
selling advertising to, Kellogg's and, whoever it is that was selling products. Do you want to sponsor
The
the,
banner.
the cereals aisle, or whatever?
Yeah.
Um, and then I worked for a web business, and then I had a redundancy, but it was to some extent, it was quite a welcome one, because I was working with the web business. I was starting to get really deep into databases and technology. What had been a very creative sale, and I definitely am a creative person, was becoming much more about the tech, the platforms, and I just thought, I'm out of my depth here. One of the things that sometimes I felt is, I know imposter syndrome is a real thing, and often deep down you just go, look, I know what I'm good at, but there is imposter syndrome. There's another thing where you feel like you're a charlatan, which is,
Yeah.
so
I'm a fraud. I'm a
I am
fake.
a fraud. I know that's the case, and I was feeling that. So when the redundancy happened, it was a chance to just reset, and I got a job that I absolutely love, which was working for Virgin Radio. And I was there for 9 years, and I was there when we became Absolute Radio as well. And I could not believe I was in that world. To wake up to a breakfast show, and then to go into the office and to be able to walk into that same studio and take customers in there, and to be around that music that I loved, and to be part of a culture that was absolutely incredible. I mean, it was a famous brand. It was a UK national business, but there were only 80 of us there,
Yeah.
including all the presenters. So it was a very, very close team. We had the most fun possible. It was just incredible. And to sell that, I just couldn't believe that I'd been part of that story. And then the privilege of helping it transition to a new brand and everything we learned there. And I ended up as the sales director of that. And then I moved to ITV, was there for 13 years. And then suddenly you're just in this world of telly. And if you like telly, you're going to love it. And it was just amazing. The people that I've met and the projects that I got to work on. I always remember someone saying, if someone gives you the keys to the Ferrari, you should probably drive it. And
Yeah.
I felt like I'd driven it.
Let me ask you about the whole television thing, because it's quite interesting. Obviously, this is where you were last working, was ITV. So you were there, what, 13 years, did you say?
That's right. Yeah, just coming up for that.
Imagine, and I mean, this is to the listeners too, imagine the differences today compared to when you first started at ITV. You must have seen so many changes in that period of time. Tell us a bit about, that transition of what TV is today versus what it was when you joined in 13 years ago.
Massively different. You're absolutely right. It's funny. I sometimes look back at old presentations and kind of see what were we talking about at the time. And I bumped into one the other day, and it felt so naive, or it
Yeah.
felt like, there was one thing that we were saying about the web or how we describe digital or whatever. It's changed massively. When I joined, which I think was 2011, it was very much, you were selling against Channel 4 and Sky, and that was your competition. So it was just like, this is why you'd use us over them. And then suddenly, seemingly out of nowhere, it all changed when YouTube comes along and online video comes along, and then it changes again when the streamers start to come along.
Yeah. Yeah.
And continually you're sort of trying to define, and then suddenly, your competitors actually become your peers. So one of the things that I think is just fantastic about what's changed in television is the amount of collaboration. Of course, you are competing for business, but actually in a lot of instances you're collaborating on technology, collaborating on strategy, and we were doing more and more. My role at ITV was a commercial marketing director, so we share events. Thinkbox is the body that promotes television in the industry, and it's absolutely an incredible organization. And together we would promote the benefits of television, which I think is just the most exceptional medium, and has been. It's changed massively since I was there, but it's ITV is 70 years old this year. You think about how it's changed over time. It's funny, people describe television as traditional media, and I don't think that there's anything traditional about it. It's always changed. It's driven technology. It's effectively demanded that manufacturers create products to enable it to live. TV screens are getting bigger. It takes up a bigger part of our homes. Now it's on every device. It's anything but traditional. I think what's exciting actually is seeing the streamers coming in, and of course they're competitors, but it shows you that TV is in great shape. Netflix is television.
Yeah.
Disney is television.
And I think what's really interesting is there's also this piece, I think, that we can learn generally in business about what you just said. Yes, of course, they're competition, but equally they're now collaboration, which means you have access to be smarter, have access to more tech, have access to more knowledge. It's exactly the same in the entrepreneurial world, Chris, which I know you're discovering yourself now, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. But it's exactly the same. We need to keep learning these lessons. Far too often, I think we say, oh no, there's a competitor. Oh no, there's a new competitor. But how much is it a competitor versus a collaborator?
Yeah.
And why can't we start working together? Because even if you think about what I do and actually now what you do, sales, presentation, storytelling, okay, take that as a category. There are thousands of entrepreneurs in this space, just in the UK alone, who are doing the same thing, but none of us do it the same. And I think
Absolutely.
this is the beauty of it, you know. So on that really positive note about, you know, stop this imposter syndrome, stop the, as I call it, comparisonitis,
Yes. Yeah.
that terrible disease of comparing yourself to others, and start thinking about, you know, who can we work with? Who is going to actually come along and make what I do even better? You know, that's a thought process, isn't it? Chris, you've come away from ITV, what, 6 months ago, you said?
That's right. Yeah.
Just a question. When you first came away, did you just know, yes, I'm going to do this? Or did you have to have that kind of moment, you know, where you stopped and said, what do I do now?
It's a really great question because I think I also, even now, I ask myself, what would I do if someone offered me the chance? Or what if I mean, I'm still working with ITV.
Yeah.
They're my first client. I really feel like I've found my thing. It's something I've thought about for many years, but I didn't do anything about. And as you will know, the timing wasn't mine. But I thought what I do next will be. And ITV also said, look, we really would like to be your first client. We want to continue working with you. And I just thought, I have to do this thing. I have to do this thing that I've thought about because if I don't, I really will look back. And I know that had I not had the, you know, the nudge, I would have done nothing about it. And then having the opportunity to start my own thing, this is the bit I would absolutely regret. I think if I'd continued until retirement or whatever, I would look back and go, oh, I wonder what would have happened.
Yeah, what would
But
it have been like?
if I had not taken this move now, that I would have regretted. So I was really determined immediately. I didn't have that moment of, oh, I wonder if I should go for another job. Um, it was then I'm going to do this. Then that is just what I'm going to do. And I suppose the first test of it was within about a month. I did get a call from an agency about a job, and it was a really great job. And I might not have got it, of course, but I actually got quite stressed about it because they said, look, have a think about it if you'd like to be considered for it. And I got very stressed about it because I just thought, but I'm doing this now. This is what I'm doing, and I don't want to go for that. I don't want to be interviewed. And my wife just said, Chris, you don't have to go for it. It's fine. I was like, well, I don't want to go for it. And I was really surprised how kind of it felt very inconvenient. And then I was just like, just chill out. Just chill out. You're doing what you want to do. And I was surprised how committed I have become to the vision of what I'm hoping this thing might turn into.
I love that. And
Yeah,
I think maybe there's this whole thing where we're programmed when we come out of the corporate world, because I came out of a corporate world. I call it that because it's basically working for somebody. And for you, huge companies. When you
yes,
come out of that, I think you're still programmed to say, well, actually, that's what I should be doing. Well,
yeah,
actually, that's safe. And actually, I'm going to get a regular salary. And so I think you have this, maybe it's a subconscious feeling even that if somebody offers you a job, you should at least look at it. And
yeah,
even though, as you say, I don't want to do that now, I want to do
yes.
this. So I love how courageous you're being, because I do think it takes courage to be an entrepreneur. And for our listeners who are dying to know what it is that you're actually going to be doing, let's talk about Goldilocks, Chris.
Well, I mean, this is quite a week to discuss this because, as you know, I've changed the company name this week, which means I've spent 2 days as my own IT director trying to get all my systems working and my I mean, if you want to talk about DNS settings for
Yeah.
emails, make sure it doesn't go through into spam. So I'm really up to speed on that. So my surname is Goldson, and since I was 4, on and off, various people have called me. I've been called Goldilocks, as a nickname, which is great. But the business is about stories and helping businesses to find their story and then to tell it brilliantly. I suppose that's the lift pitch. Those stories might be anything from a a keynote speech that someone might be delivering at a conference. It might be a pitch for business. It might be an award pitch. It might be I've been working with someone who's just gone in as a new managing director of a business, so to sort of help them make the right first impression. So how do they position themselves and what's their narrative? So there are some presentations I think we do, or stories that we tell, that are kind of wow moments, hopefully. There are others that we might tell over a period of time. So it might be the narrative of a sales proposition that we might tell over 3 years or 5 years, and more than one person's probably going to tell it, and they're going to add to it, and they're going to enrich it, make it even more substantial, and bring themselves to it. So some stories are in the moment and others are over a period of time. A lot of my career and it's been the thing that I've loved the most, has been about, well, what is the story? How do you articulate what you do in a really succinct way that helps everyone feel that they understand the story, how to structure it, and feel really excited about taking it out and telling it. And then I can help people in terms of how do you then deliver it. So you start getting into performance. How do you present, with confidence? How do you communicate with an audience, whether you're on a big conference stage, or whether you're in a boardroom, or whether you're chatting to someone over Zoom? How do you do that? And how do you make a presentation feel more like it's a moment of connection and conversation, rather than who's got the slides?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or it doesn't really matter, I'll just sort of whiz through it, without giving a thought to it as a story. It's just like, here's all the facts. So that's the idea. So going back to Goldilocks, aside from it being my nickname, but Goldilocks is it's a story everybody knows, but probably can't ever remember being told it the first time. But we all know that everybody knows it. And there are some brands that feel like that. I can't remember a time when I didn't know about Coca-Cola or whatever. And also Goldilocks just got this brilliant device in there, which is the power of three.
Power of three, absolutely.
3 bowls, 3 chairs, 3 beds. And that's a big part of the devices that you can use to structure a story, that are really simple, that can just make such a big difference. So that's why Goldilocks really works.
I'm super, super impressed you've got the trademark on it, actually, because I'm surprised. Was it challenging, or was it just relatively easy?
Surprisingly, because I've had 2 other trademarks that were unsuccessful. And whilst I was kind of they were amicable discussions, but they were unsuccessful. But whilst that was going on, I actually thought, I need a business registered with Companies House. And I couldn't believe that Goldilocks. I just thought, well, I'll go for Goldilocks Limited. So I couldn't believe it was around. I literally couldn't believe I got it. And in fact, you have an accountant, as you know. Talk to the accountant. He just said, I can't believe you've got it.
No.
And I've managed to get it. So I feel an affinity myself, a connection there, and it allows me to use it as a device to talk about stories,
To tell a
actually.
story, Chris, as
Yeah.
you have just done for us.
Or just,
Um, I think there's also this really interesting piece around storytelling, because as you know, I work with stories in what I do, because obviously I'm predominantly doing a sales coaching element and sales training. I talk about UHP, as you know, your
yes,
unique
yeah,
human proposition. But within that, there's storytelling. Part of a
absolutely.
UHP is your stories, because they're your own personal stories. No one else has got them. I always come across people who say to me, I don't have a story.
Mm.
Why do you think, Chris, that people feel this way? What do you think happens when you say to someone, tell your stories, and then they say, well, I don't have any stories? What's happening, do you think?
I think when you talk about stories, they just think of, oh, it's a TV show or it's, a book I'm reading or something, and they don't see the application sometimes to themselves.
Yeah.
They will see someone who's a great storyteller, but they don't necessarily see it in themselves. I think there's something of the language of just the word story. Sometimes it feels like, and again, my chatting to my wife over the years, sometimes I've talked about storytelling in a business context, and she's found that she's a teacher, and she's just said that that's really odd to me that you talk about stories,
Yeah.
but actually it is about stories. And stories are about structure and connection and direction and where's this going and interest, etc. And I think often in business we don't think about it like that. You just think about, what do I need to tell people?
What are the facts I need to sell something is usually what I come across. Is
Exactly.
you've also touched on something there which I sort of had this moment then, and I thought, actually, this is it. Maybe the word stories is associated very much in fiction terms, whereas
Yes.
actually stories are factual stories as well. And
Yeah.
when we talk about stories in business, I think they're far more factual stories, which is
They
probably
are.
where this disconnect comes, that you've just described.
Yeah. I think also people don't realize that they have incredible stories because they haven't been prompted. Ask people if they got a ghost story. Goodness me, you'll see the room change.
It's so
And
true.
everyone will listen. Have you met anyone famous? Or
Yeah,
what were they like? And
yeah.
people, I was with someone the other day who got punched. He got punched by Muhammad Ali, right? Kind of, not in an angry way, but he met him and he took a punch from Muhammad Ali, and it wasn't a full-on one. But he just told this great story about it. Lots of stories and funny stories, and maybe people don't see what they've got stories. They just go, oh, that. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Actually, when they tell you, it's like, oh my goodness, aren't
yeah,
aren't we interesting?
yeah,
And it's getting people to just see that their personal experiences can be applied to a business
yeah,
conversation
yeah,
as a way of connecting. One of the most important questions I think everyone should ask before they deliver any presentation is, why are you presenting? Why not someone else? And if you are presenting, what are you going to bring of yourself to it?
mm,
And, a personal story, or a prop, or a piece of music or an image or something that connects you and starts maybe in a different, more interesting space, gets people to buy into you before you then get into maybe the more predictable stuff about your product.
yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
and it's a relief to the audience. You just think, oh,
Yeah,
it's going to be
yeah,
interesting.
great.
But as you've said, Jules, when I've seen you, do your stuff, and you've talked about the power of, we're all different, and stories make us different, and how you've had success through the stories that you've told. You just go, it's exactly that.
Yeah, it is. And a lot of it is down to, as you say, oh, that story, I didn't realize anyone would actually want to know that. And that's this inner lack of confidence that we seem to have. And also, we are taught, well, certainly my generation, we're very much taught, don't show off,
Mm.
be quiet. And I think part of that quashes us wanting to be in a room and say, you never guess what happened to me, because it feels showy offy. But
Mm.
actually, when you position it in the right way, it's super interesting, and it is part of your experience of life, which is what I think is super magical. So
Absolutely.
listen, I love the topic of what you're going to be doing in your business for sure.
Thank
I
you.
want to now ask you who you want to be working with, because I think, from a listening perspective for the audience, it would be great to know, who's the customer that you want to work with.
Well, I'm discovering, I think, slowly discovering. Someone said to me, "Are you only going to work with TV companies? And are you going to expand to other media companies?" I thought, oh, I want to get out of media. I mean, to some extent, I want to work with. I think there's the potential for stories to be told everywhere, and there are crimes of PowerPoint committed every day in all manner of industries. And I've been surprised by some of the conversations that I've had. I'm talking to, in discussion with a supply chain company and a shipping company at the moment. I've never been involved in that world, but they need to communicate.
Yeah.
They share information internally. They share information around the world, and then obviously they've got clients and they've got account management teams, and they have to update their customers and sell services to them, and they have to stand out. One of the things I've really found is looking at a few other industries is how predictable I think a lot of companies look in terms of the category norms. You can do a Google search for a particular industry and you'll just see all the imagery that comes up. Now AI, give me a mood board on this particular industry, and suddenly it will just show you as if there are rules of how a website should look or the
Yeah.
language that should be used or whatever. Look, every business really pretty much is being asked to grow. And if you're going to grow, you're going to grow at the cost of something else or someone else. So you have to kind of outperform the category, the market, your competitors, and therefore you need to stand out from them.
Yeah.
And yet, when it comes to the piece of communication, so often you just go, "Oh, these are the rules. We'll just blend in with them. We'll continue to add the jargon." If AI can create a website or your website copy within 10 seconds, and you go, "Actually, that's pretty good," you're not going to stand out. What's the point? So storytelling is a way of changing that behavior of making it more personal, make it more memorable, making you stand for something rather than stand for everything. Who's my customer? It's anyone who needs to stand out and find a way of differentiating themselves. That might be an individual, so it might be someone who's thinking, I'm at a conference, I'd love to be the best speaker, or I'd love my story really to resonate. Or it might be, how can we emotionally connect with a business audience? I'm not sure everyone thinks about that. I think there's we're still people. And again, Jules, this is exactly your sweet spot. It's about the human being.
Yeah.
Even in a business setting, you've got an audience full of people who are sitting there thinking, at best, I hope it's okay. It's like, but at worst, oh, I hope this isn't another kind of, and yet they'll still sit through it.
Yeah.
Why not surprise them with something that feels interesting, exciting, and human and fun or emotional or or challenging?
Challenging, yeah. I felt just the same about the whole sales process thing. So when I started, which is actually 8 years ago this year, so I'm a little bit ahead of you on that journey, Chris.
You are.
And what was really amazing was that my business started as I will be a coach and I'll coach everyone. I had a Zoom call with my old sales manager from Yellow Pages,
Right.
Michael, and I was chatting to him. I was so excited. Michael, I'm going to be a coach. And he said, "Great. What are you coaching?" "Everything, Michael, anything. I've seen it all." He said, "Are you going to coach sales, Jules?" And I went, "Oh, I hadn't thought of that." And he said, "But that's what you're really good at, Jules," like this. So that was really interesting. And then from that, though, Chris, it was exactly the same thought process that I had. I can coach sales and I can train everybody how to sell like they did in the 80s, and like Yellow Pages trained me, and like every other sales trainer still today trains people. I can train them a process. And then I thought, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
I want to train them about the emotional side of selling. I want to train them about human connection. And that's then when my whole journey started with Live It, Love It, Sell It, Power of Three,
Yeah.
UHP, oh, Power of Three.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
To be honest, it's just been a joy, a complete joy. And when I have been able to work with teams, they've all said, we haven't looked at it like this before. We
Yes.
haven't done this before. Yeah, of course, you've got a process that sits underneath it. You're always going to have some sort of framework, but
Mm.
they've never stopped to think, how do we make ourselves different? You've got a whole sales team, but it's a team of individuals. And I just love what I do in terms of that, Chris. And you're going to do exactly the same thing in terms of
But
what you're bringing, you know?
yeah, and I think probably what you remind them of, or make them aware of, is that they are part of the service of the product.
Yeah.
That actually they can, in some cases, maybe even be the biggest differentiator against the competition. You know, if you've got ad tech service providers, you know, yes, they're going to have the you know the differences in the product and the performance, etc., but also, you know, what's the account management like, what are some of the ideas, or the, you know, the creative applications,
Yeah.
and how can a salesperson help a client see the opportunities and walk them through it and help them to get the most out of it. Well, then that's the person. And I wonder whether sometimes they don't see that they are the product as well
Yeah,
as
I think you're
the
right.
product itself.
Yeah, I think you're right. So look, we need to wrap things up in terms of the podcast, because otherwise you and I will definitely talk all day.
Okay.
Partly my fault, but I know you enjoy it as much. I want to just touch on what that journey's been like. It's only been 6 months, but has it surprised you? Have you had things that you went, oh my goodness, I didn't realize that? What's it felt like being an entrepreneur?
It's been, I mean, the world looks different. It feels very different. The biggest surprise I think I've had is I was expecting that I would feel really alone. And when I first did it, I just thought, I don't want to be alone. You know, I like seeing people, I like chatting, that really was something I just thought, how am I going to cope with that? The reality is I haven't had to cope with it. I can't believe how supportive people have been to me. I've met so many people who've done it. I mean, you're one of them, Jules, you know, and the encouragement that you've given, meeting other people on this journey who who have also been helped, and therefore they help others. And I hope that I can help others as well, to give them confidence, to talk things out, to share ideas. There are people that I've been trained by, Stephen Curley from the Confident Club, who are absolutely in this space around presentation confidence. And I've known them for 20 years, I think, and they've trained me, and they've trained a lot of my teams before. And I love them to bits. And when I told them what I was going to do, they just went, "Oh, you're going to be great. We'll help you." And they've been so helpful. They've given me guidance. They've given me some materials and encouragement. They're going to, and I couldn't believe their generosity. Um, Neil Malarkey, who's one of the founders of the Comedy Store Players, who helps businesses in their communication skills around you know, using the principles of improvisation. Again, I've known him for like 15 years or so, and he's trained my teams. Has just spent time with me and just said, "Look, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that?
Mm,
Here's how you can apply," and given me confidence. So I've got people who potentially I'm competing with who've just gone, it's big enough for all of us.
exactly.
We want everyone to succeed, and I really want to be like that for others, to encourage them, because this world, this network has just opened up. I can't believe that's been the biggest surprise of all.
Yeah.
Love it. I feel like I'm part of something that it's almost like an underground movement support network, and I absolutely love it. And that's been the biggest, most joyful surprise of everything, I
I
think.
think that's so lovely to hear. And I think there may be other entrepreneurs listening again, hopefully, who are saying, yeah, but I don't necessarily have those connections. So go out and join networking groups and make sure one of the key things you do, regardless, is be with people at least once a week,
Yes,
because then at least then you are making those connections. And those same people will be just like Chris has described. They will all want to help you because they have been where you were, and this is what you have to remember. So you've just got to have that confidence. And it's a courageous thing, and I'll say it again, to do this, but it's one of the most joyous things that you really can do, to be honest. I'm so excited about your journey, Chris. I really
thank
am.
you, Jules. Do you know what's great? I was chatting to someone last night. I was at a networking thing last night, and we were talking about the fact that you are only working on the work that you are interested in and are good at, in a way, because that's the function that you've decided to focus on. And what's great is, and I see it with you, Jules, I've seen you speak twice now, is you can see the passion in you. And when you hear people talking about the businesses that they've founded and they're doing their thing, that passion really comes out and is also part of the product.
Mm.
It's so wonderful,
Yeah.
you are modeling exactly what you're telling your audience, and the way that
Oh,
you're helping
thank
them.
you.
And that's just one of the most joyful things I think about doing this, is feeling like I only now will need to talk about stuff that I kind of have an opinion on, I'm hopefully good at, and I'm really fascinated by and excited about, that I get
Yeah.
to do all the time. So
Yeah, and the things you've experienced, because a lot of the stuff I do is based around my own journey and what I learned, so that's the joy. I just love helping people, so I'm always going to love what I do for sure.
it's great.
Chris, I'm going to put your links and details into the show notes so that
Thank you.
people can connect with you. And please, audience, whatever you do when you finish listening to this podcast, just connect with this man. He's an absolute joy. He's lovely. You can feel his energy just in our
Oh, thank you,
conversation we've
Jules.
just had. It's amazing. And the experience you have too, Chris. Don't ever underplay how much you must know in all of those roles you've had and the journey you've had. Incredible. That's worth gold, truly worth gold. So, one last question I usually ask, and no,
Okay.
none of my guests know about this, but I think just that one piece of advice you would give to anyone listening who is perhaps like you, they've come out of corporate and now they're doing their own thing. What's that one bit of advice that you would give, do you think?
Listen to other people, get evidence from other people, encouragement from other people. I think, to your point earlier, see people, ask them questions, ask them what they think you're good at, get encouragement, get testimonials. I think you need a perspective of the reality of yourself. And I think particularly when you're making a move, and if you are moving out of corporate for the first time and making the leap, you've got so many questions. I found it very hard to know the reality of what I am. I still do. And I ask people, what do you think I'm good at? What do you think I'm worth? What do you think I might be able to help you with? And then over time, I think you'll get more clarity over the offer. But seek advice, guidance, and the perspectives of
I
others.
think it's a great piece of advice. I think it's a very vulnerable piece of advice. But if anything, get out of your own way, guys. Get out
Yes.
of your own
Yeah.
way, because to be vulnerable and to allow your ego to stay where it needs to be and get that feedback, will be a real revelation. I think it's super, super piece of advice, Chris. We're going to talk again. We're definitely going to work together. I just know it. And we already have. And I'm so grateful of your commitment to me and your support to me too. That's been amazing.
Oh, no, it's been great.
Thank you so much for listening to our dulcet tones and our human conversation. I've loved it as always. I always do. If you want to subscribe, we are on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. We are also on SoundCloud, and this will be on YouTube, so you will see our beautiful faces. But please tune in again to the next episode of The Human Conversation. Ta-ta for now.
You've just been listening to the Human Conversation podcast with Jules White. To find out more about the other work that Jules does, please visit her website, www.liveitloveitsellit.co.uk. And if you enjoyed the podcast, then please do leave a rating and review on the platform you use to enjoy her show. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.